everyone, it's Ivan, kitbadger.com, here to bring you another gear review, and today, talking about this upper receiver right here, made for me by Criterion Barrels. Backing up a step, where'd this upper receiver come from? Well, story starts back in 2018 at TriggerCon over in Bellevue, Washington. I was there at the convention and I ran into Michael from Criterion Barrels. He said, "Hey, Ivan, really appreciate your work, cool videos. If I can ever get you a barrel, maybe make you up a receiver, I would love to." And I was like, you know what? Thanks, I really appreciate that. So fast forward a number of months, I'd kind of worked through a backlog of stuff and I was like, you know what? That would be really cool to get up a receiver from Criterion Barrels. Reached out to Michael and said, "Hey, can we do this?" And he said, "Yeah, I would love to." And I was like, "All right, sounds good." He said, "Just send me a upper receiver and a rail and I'll get the thing squared away." So I was like, all right, sounds good. So I ended up sending them this Mega Arms upper receiver. At the time, it had a 10.5-inch stainless barrel in there with what was a 10-inch Noveske rail. Can't stand that time barrel nut. And because of that, rather than swap the rail or do anything else, I ended up chopping part of that rail off so that I could put this War Comp and a Surefire 7.62 Mini on there, because I already had that can. So I cut away part of the rail so that I could actually make it work with the suppressor. Anyway, I was like, you know what? I don't use this upper receiver that much. I'm gonna go ahead and send it off. So I sent it off with bolt carrier group and this charging handle. And I said, here, how about rebarreling this with something? And he said, all right, well, how about one of our 12.5-inch barrels? And I was like, you know what? That sounds good. What happened from there was basically an email exchange and an explanation of a lot of work that got done. Keep in mind, AR platforms, on their face, they're pretty simple. We've gotten to a place with respect to manufacturing, they're basically adult Legos. You can go ahead, build yourself a pretty awesome rifle, pretty simple. It's gonna function. Like, most of the parts are so well made within tolerances that it's gonna work. But when you start talking to someone that actually knows their craft, the waters are pretty deep. And to that end, Michael absolutely knows his craft. So rather than try and paraphrase, I'm gonna go ahead and read basically an email. I'll admit it's kind of lengthy, but there's an incredible amount of just depth and knowledge in it. So after receiving my upper receiver, he started looking at it and he's like, you know what? We're gonna do this, we're gonna do it right, so here's what's about to happen. Ivan, I wanted to write you with an update on your upper as I had the opportunity to go over it in depth. I selected a 12.5-inch chrome lined barrel for you and reassembled your upper with a few modifications. On your original upper receiver, I noticed a few areas where wear had occurred in the bolt cam pin cutout. See pictures. This is usually caused by timing issues caused by the gas system, the bolt, headspace, and bolt carrier, as well as the recoil assembly, spring, and buffer. I know that you shoot a great deal suppressed, which is likely the main cause of this wear when coupled with fitment issues. As you know, adding a suppressor increases gas flow and affects timing, specifically the lock bolt dwell time. Locked bolt dwell time refers to the amount of time your bolt stays forward and locked after you fire a round and is essential in proper timing and function of any gas gun. When you chamber a loaded round and fire the weapon, the brass from the cartridge expands to the size of the chamber walls and creates a seal. As the propellants are ignited and expand, the bullet is forced down the bore, as you know. Some of those gases are vented up the gas porthole in the barrel and down the gas tube into the gas key. This causes the bolt carrier group to move to the rear, the bolt to unlock, and the process of extraction to begin. The issues occur when this process takes place too quickly and extraction begins before the brass has had a chance to shrink back down after it is expanded to the chamber walls. If you do not have the proper lock time, you're essentially ripping brass which is expanded into the chamber walls out of the chamber. This increases extraction force needed to cycle the bolt and absorbs much of the inertia of the bolt moving to the rear. This frequently results in stovepipes, double feeds, failures to extract, eject, or even ripping the rim right off the case. This also places a lot of unnecessary wear and tear on extractors and the chamber walls of the barrel, and wear is frequently seen in the cam pin slot in the upper. If extraction begins before all the chamber pressures have subsided and the brass returns to a smaller size, pressures frequently escape out the rear of the chamber during premature extraction. This also creates accuracy issues due to the inconsistent chamber pressures, as well as reliability issues, more felt recoil, increased muzzle rise, inconsistent recoil impulse, and a number of other negative side effects. This is another reason checking headspace is essential, as an improper bolt or barrel fitment only increases all of these issues. My recommendation is to increase the weight of your buffer to at least the weight of a H3 buffer, in the area of 5.6 ounces. This will assist in maintaining proper timing, function, and accuracy. It will keep the bolt forward and locked for a fraction of a second longer, which will greatly smooth out and refine your rifle. As I said, the waters are deep, but it continues. So what I did was true up the upper receiver so that the barrel sits perfectly true to the barrel extension slot. The bolt raceway is also perfectly in line with your barrel, all good for increasing accuracy and reducing wear. I replaced the original gas tube and gas block with a new low-profile gas block and carbine-length gas tube. I noted that you had modified your Noveske Handguard, which I cleaned up. We are a machine shop after all, and attempted to use it, but didn't like the barrel nut had to be timed. I felt like it was either over or under torqued. I replaced your Noveske Handguard with a new BCM rail that does not require timing of the barrel nut. Yes, I like that. I generally like to install barrel nuts on the higher end of mil-spec torque spectrum. Mil-spec is 30 to 80 foot-pounds. I generally like to go between 60 and 80 foot-pounds, as I've seen the best accuracy in this range. I've used Noveske rails and currently do, but I've never been a fan of the timed barrel nut system. Man, I am with you there. I examined your bolt carrier group and the gas rings were not quite as tight as I would like to see, and the headspace was not where I would like it to be. Also, your bolt carrier has material removed from the underside of the bolt carrier, which reduces the weight of the bolt carrier. See attached pictures. Again, that affects timing and locked bolt dwell time, as the lighter bolt carrier group moves more quickly to the rear during cycling. I replaced your bolt carrier with a mil-spec full mass bolt carrier group and headspaced a new BCM bolt to your barrel. Your new bolt has a good seal on the gas rings as well as superior tension on the extractor. The crane O-ring is installed. Lastly, I'm going to take your upper out for testing. The M4 feed ramps of your upper are ever so slightly offset, and I want to ensure that it runs perfectly before I send it out. I hope to have your upper receiver shipping to you by the end of the week. All your original parts pieces will be included with your upper receiver, i.e. Noveske barrel, handguard, muzzle device, bolt carrier group, etc. I'm sorry for the insanely long email. I've apparently had way too much coffee today. I greatly appreciate your patience, and please let me know if you have any questions. Keep up the good work with Kit Badger. As always, Marines get special treatment. Michael. Awesome.
Left tie. Yep.
Where does all that leave me? With an amazing upper receiver group. It's amazing to see someone like that knowledgeable within their field of expertise and being able to break down and honestly explain a lot of stuff. Granted, as far as the cycle of operations, totally familiar with that as far as how that stuff works. What I wasn't familiar with is just kind of all those little nuances along the way as far as kind of the how and why, how important it is to actually have something trued up, to include your upper receiver, to the actual barrel, where it fits in there, all of that stuff. And yeah, really, really impressed. So to that end, how is this done for me? It's done a great job. I actually took this down to include with this Aero Precision M4A1 pistol lower receiver kit, SBA 3 race on here. And I ended up running this down at the Shooter Symposium 2019 down in Texas. Thing did great. Whole time I was there, I was actually running it with a Surefire SOCOM RC2 suppressor on here. Thing did a great job. What I did notice, largely in part because of the not heavy buffer in this low receiver, is it was basically a little bit over gas. So how did I deal with that? I actually ended up swapping out because I hadn't been running it suppressed up to that point. So since was throwing brass a little far forward. I ended up swapping it out with the Surefire optimized bolt carrier group, which admittedly was not headspace to this, but for the sake of the classes I was taking and the accuracy requirement in them, I didn't notice any degradation whatsoever, and it basically made it shoot a little bit softer, threw the brass back more towards 3 o'clock. But in my experience past that, how is this done for me, say with respect to accuracy? For my accuracy testing, I ended up shooting this off of a Atlas bipod and a rear bag. And on top of here, I threw a Bushnell 4-16 Nitro, just so I could get a nice refined sight picture out at 100 yards. So shooting 5-shot groups, this is what I ended up with. Starting off with some Minuteman Munitions 55 grain training ammo. I was getting groups between 2.3 inches, and then for whatever reason, me, likely, opening up to about 4 inches. I also tried some of the Idaho Ordnance Factory training ammo, again 55 grains, coming in about 2.4 inches as well as 2 inches. Also trying the Hornady Black 62 grain. That came in for me at about 2.6 inches, with my best group being 1.2 inches. Also Hornady Black, the 5.56 75 grain interlock, came in at about 2.6 inches, with my second group coming in at 2.5 inches. Trying out some Winchester White Box 55 grain, I ended up with one group at 5.1 inches, and my best second group with that was still 3 inches. I also tried the Fiocchi 69 grain boat tail hollow point match key. First group I got was 1.7 inches, second group being 2.6 inches. Also tried was the American Eagle 55 grain. First group coming in at about 2.1 inches, second group at 3.5 inches. Also tried some of the Minuteman Munitions 68 grain boat tail hollow point with the Hornady Match AMP projectiles. That came in at about 1.85 inches, and then lastly, I tried some Hornady Match 75 grain boat tail hollow point, coming in about 3.5 inches. Again, damn flyers. That second one, if it wasn't for that flyer, would have been a nice 0.75 inches, but you get what you get. I've absolutely been really pleased with this upper receiver. It's ran really well for me, and as far as I'm concerned, really accurate. Those numbers I gave you, is that indicative of this barrel, ammo, all that? It's indicative of my ability with this upper receiver on that day that I was shooting. One thing I will say is I was actually shooting off a SBR lower, not like the cleanest, lightest trigger, which honestly probably would have improved all of those numbers across the board, but it's what I was out there shooting with. And frankly, pretty pleased. Across the spectrum with all those rounds, pretty good performance, especially considering 12.5 inch. And to that end, this seems to kind of be the sweet spot for a lot of people with respect to either pistols or SBRs. That 12.5 inches, again, using a carbine length gas system, giving you kind of the sweet spot as far as dwell time, which Michael was speaking about, and also muzzle velocity. Since 223, 5.56, damage, lethality, largely predicated on muzzle velocity, and as I understand it, the difference from 12.5 inches to say 10.5 inches is significant, whereas the difference between about 12.5 inches and like 14.5 inches is not very significant, which is why a lot of people apparently prefer the 12.5 inch upper receivers for pistols or carbines. So there is that. But ultimately, I've been really, really pleased with this upper receiver group and really appreciate the opportunity to be able to run it. Thank you guys again over at Criterion Barrels. Lastly, if you aren't familiar with Criterion Barrels, check them out. Beyond like AR barrels, they make a lot of different stuff for a lot of different weapons, whether it's M1 Grands, Remington 700s, all kinds of different barrels over there. Make sure you go check them out. And as always, thanks for joining us at kitbadger.com. Look forward to seeing you next time. I don't wanna be something I'm not. Every time I